Hello, 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 hello. All right, second episode in my influencer series. And today I get to introduce you to my pastor, which is so fun. Brian and his family have been with us for a couple years at Mountain View. And as I was thinking about this and putting this out, I was thinking, man, we have had such good leadership at our church and just Christ-centered teaching. And it's just, I don't know, I'm just really grateful for that. And Brian is no exception. They have integrated into our church body in such a beautiful way. It feels like they've been there forever. But what strikes me with Brian as I've asked him to come and be on this series is I feel like each week he is influencing me in the area of how I shine out into the world, and how when I'm even interacting with somebody at the grocery store or the workplace, which we'll talk about, how I have a responsibility to point others to Jesus in the way that I behave. And I am very grateful that we just wrapped this series, which you'll hear us talk about, the gospel at work. And I'm grateful for the reminder that, we have opportunity every day in our work, whatever that looks like for you, to portray God's character and to reflect God's character. And so anyways, this has felt like really wonderful timing to get this out into the world, and really grateful. I would encourage you, I'm going to put it in the show notes, but we actually, like I said, just ended this sermon series, which is called The Gospel at Work. And it was really powerful and I think amazing for a lot of reasons. And I'm going to go ahead and put in the show notes our website, which is mvccweb.org. So you can go there and check out all the sermons that were in that series, because I think it's a really great one to go catch. And, this is just an invitation. If you are local to the Snohomish area and you are looking for a church home, we would love to have you come visit at Mountain View Community Church. And hopefully today, as you hear Brian, you'll get a feel for, what we're all about. And yeah, I'm just really excited to share with you somebody who influences me on a very regular basis. And I hope this episode influences you as well. All right, with that, here's Brian. Hello, fellow plate spinners. I'm really glad you're here for your weekly dose of authenticity and joy. I'm Selena Johnson, and your guide through this chaos of busy lives. In each episode, we unpack real tools to conquer overwhelm and dodge burnout. It's all about creating space for what truly matters. Whether it be through solo reflections or inspiring guests, this is your sanctuary for a more centered, productive you, with a healthy serving of that joy we talked about. Get ready to hit pause on life while we dive in to some real chats. Hope you enjoy. Okay, so I have a very special guest today. I'm going to introduce you to my pastor, which is very exciting for me. And I had this idea to do this influencer series, and I was in church, Brian, and I was like, he literally was like, walk up to him and ask him. I was like, okay, I will. So this last Sunday, I pounced. I was like, do you want to be on my podcast? And so I want to introduce you guys to my pastor, Brian Hebert, who is a teacher. I would say that's what we love about Brian, is he is bringing God's word to our congregation and to the world. And so, Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Such an honor to be here, especially on a series about your influencers. That's such a, I don't think of myself that way, but
I know.
I'm honored to be included in that list.
You are very much an influencer of mine. So tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're at in life. And we know you're a pastor, but what else?
Yeah, so job wise, I am a pastor. I'm also a professor at a couple different schools, and I have worked in the oil field in the corporate sector. Been a missionary, lived overseas a couple different times before. I've kind of done a lot of odds and ends. I'm a bit of a hobby collector. I'm a dad. I've got 5 kids. Um, I come from Texas. I moved up to Washington kind of midway. It was after the pandemic in Texas, but during the pandemic, still in Washington. So
Yeah. Has it been 2 years? I was trying to do the math. Is this your
I've been
second?
here 2 years. Yeah,
Okay, that's what I was thinking. This month, right, is when you guys kind of, yeah,
exactly. Almost to the day.
yeah, yeah. I love it. That's crazy. Yes, I love that. I was like, has it been 2 whole years? It just flew by. Yes.
It really has flown by.
And you have a beautiful bride who we love very much, who
Thank you.
is a good friend of mine, and I love
I
her.
do too.
I know you do. So, okay, so we have so much to talk about. Well, first of all, I just
Yes.
want to love on you a little bit and tell you, like, really, as an influencer for me, I think one of the things that I respect and admire about you is, first of all, I've watched you come into a new congregation. I think
Hmm.
that's no easy feat, really. I mean, you're getting to know hundreds of people and you're trying to get your feet under you, and you've done it with grace, and you have such humility. So I just want to say that that's something that strikes me with you, is that you kind of enter just curious, I would say. I don't know
Mm,
if you feel the same way, but I watch you kind of,
definitely, yeah.
yeah, you like to
The
ask
curious part,
questions.
not the humble part, but
Yeah,
yeah.
you're humble. You're humble. See, exactly. Proving my
No.
point. Proving my point. But I think that I would just first love to ask you, like, what do you feel like? Can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to this place of ministry, and how you have felt called to this mission? Because it's very much comes natural, it seems to you, although I'm sure you stretch yourself every day, but it seems like a good fit. So I was curious, like, when you were called to ministry, or how that has come to fruition.
I'll be like, if we're talking, are we talking ministry in general or Mountain View
Sure.
specifically?
Yeah. Ministry in general, I think.
I'd
Yeah.
say ministry in general, I think I knew since childhood. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home and I became a believer. I was about 7.5 years old, lived in Scotland, and just like always had access to the gospel. My parents read the Bible to us every night, and so became a believer early on. And I think really, as long as I can remember, I just knew that God wanted to use me in a ministry capacity.
Mhm.
And then I've kind of just done that off and on, basically since late high school, early college days. Sometimes officially with the church, sometimes
Mhm.
in the corporate sector, which is why you know issues like the gospel at work are so big in my mind.
Mhm.
But with Mountain View specifically, we were living in Houston. We were in a super international section of Houston. I had a food blog there. We were at a church that had 50 nationalities. My kids were at a school with
Wow.
114 nationalities. Our census district was 80% foreign born. So, like, whatever you think of Texas, my neighborhood in Houston was not whatever you
Mhm.
think of Texas.
Mhm.
Um, and so, if you had asked my wife, is Brian ever going to leave Texas or ever going to leave Houston? She would have said no, and I would have said no too. And then the pot slowly was turned up on my life, and I didn't realize it. So, I'm a dad with 5 kids. I was a pastor at the time. I was teaching at 2 different schools. I was working with some missions work inside of Houston. So we've trained and sent about 40 missionaries overseas. We were working with about a 250,000 Muslim people there in the city of Houston. And so, I mean, you just listen to all of that. You go, okay, how did you have time to do
Yeah,
all
I'm
that?
overwhelmed.
The
Yeah.
answer is I don't know how I did it all, honestly.
Yeah.
I think I was very unhealthy, and COVID put the kibosh on everything I was doing, one by one by one. Um, and I realized through that kind of enforced break and space and kind of an emptying, that was good for me. And I thought, oh, this is what it's like to lie down and just sleep at night. Uh,
Mm. Mhm.
and so then as COVID was coming out, we thought, we really need to make some better choices going forward, because I could just feel all of the things coming back. And so
Yeah.
we kind of just opened our hands to God and said, okay, I looked at jobs overseas, different churches overseas, Indonesia, Malaysia, Dubai, France, Latin America. I looked at different churches in America. I did look at stuff in Houston as well. I also looked at, is this the time to go back into the corporate sector? I feel like some of my best years of ministry was when I worked in
Mhm.
a corporate office.
We're
And
going to talk
so,
about that for sure.
yeah.
I want to talk so much about that.
So basically, like, there's this little church out here in a place we'd never heard of in beautiful Washington, and
Yeah.
and
How do you even pronounce Snohomish, right?
Snohomish. Yeah. We had lots of discussions about how to pronounce Snohomish, um and I kept telling my wife, like, don't count your chickens before they're hatched. Like, they're gonna figure out I'm too Texan, too Southern, too Baptist, too something, and they're gonna go with some local guy. So don't. And
Yeah.
and they kept talking to me, and so we moved in a month once the decision was made.
Yeah. It
So
was
that's the short version.
Yeah, I know there was so much. I mean, I know Christy and I have talked about the even the house process and everything just was God. I know. And I think that that is such a leap of faith. So let's start there because my audience, so much of us we're working through overwhelm. Like that's
Mm,
and I think that you kind of get into this like hamster wheel, if you will. Like, I have to do these things to keep everything going. And then when you realize God's calling you to something different, it's scary because, I mean, sometimes jumping off that hamster wheel can feel terrifying. I know with the pandemic, it kind of, like you said, peeled back things one by one. But how do you go about that process of confirmation? Is this what you're calling us to do? And like for you personally, how do you hear God? Because I think it's unique for different people.
yeah, I would say I'm probably not a great example of this, actually.
Good.
I would say it took a global pandemic and my whole life
Yeah.
shutting down for me to be open to
Yeah.
the idea that
Yes, I
I
love
needed some
that.
change. Um, I think one of the moments of realization um, was I was already exhausted and I was in the jungle on a mission trip. And like you always come back from a mission trip kind of on zero. I was
Mm.
starting the trip on zero. So this was not a
Mm. Your
like everything
tank
was
was
happening leading up.
empty.
Yeah. And I'm going, and it was really a message for me, but it was from Jesus's words where he says, "Come to me, all you who are weak and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. My yoke is light. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Learn from me." And I thought, I do not feel this right now. I feel like everything is just crushing me. So who's wrong, right? Is it me or is it Jesus? Well, chances are it's not Jesus, so that leaves me in this equation. I go,
Oh,
how
that's powerful.
how
Yeah.
have I turned his yoke into this cruelty that I'm living?
Hmm.
Um, and that's what kind of was one of the first wake up calls for me of I have made this wrong. Like I have taken too much on myself. Like this is his ministry, not my ministry. And I'm doing too much and I'm doing so much in my own strength. Like
Hmm.
any amount in your own strength is too much, but I was doing a lot in my own strength and I think it was beginning to show.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. My One of my life verses is Galatians 5:1, which is, it's for freedom that we are set
Mm,
free. Do not put yourself again in a burden of slavery. And I hear you because I think that I'm very so understand. Like that was me several years ago and has really led me to this point, even having a podcast, is just that idea that I had to be all things to all people and I had to do all this right. I. And it's
mhm.
like he really does fill in those gaps. So, and the thing is too, like if I don't do everything, that leaves room for other people to do things too. And that was
Yeah.
big for me. I had to check work, especially, which I want to talk to you about because I know we have a series that probably when this comes out there'll be some episodes for people to listen to, and I'll link it in the show notes. But that for me at work that was the thing that had to flip upside down. Was I really did think my value was doing it all and trying to
Hmm.
spin the plates, if you will, and I wasn't giving room for anyone else to enter into that, right? And what really was happening is I wasn't shining as Jesus would. I was shining as Selena would, and that is
Right.
way dimmer than what they would see Jesus in. So talk to me a little bit about this series we have coming up, and talk to me about the workplace. This is going to be like, I think we're going to have a great conversation here about what you're going to talk about, because every time you do this, every time you have a sermon on this, I don't know if you notice me at all because you're just like talking, but I'm always like, yes, talk about work. Let's talk about work. Let's talk about work. So yeah.
This might freak you out, but I actually do notice you. I'm
Good.
a multitasker and like I don't know if it's ADD or what it is, but like when I'm speaking in front of a room,
Yes.
I am looking at all the faces
Yeah.
which is
Good.
good.
That's
It's good, but
great.
also it can be a little distracting because like I catch just about like every twitch and
Yeah.
eye roll
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
side laughter and everything else. Um,
When I'm like saying, yelling preach from the back row or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
like
no,
it.
I do see you there.
Yes. I light
Um,
up when we get this topic going for
Yeah,
sure.
work is such a fascinating thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like for the average person who goes to church, like the way that the Bible is talked about, it sounds like it's for a bunch of preachers and missionaries,
Yeah.
and you have access to that narrative and that story insofar as you were willing to sort of volunteer and work in that kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you go, well, what does God have for me as we'll call it a normal, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a regular Joe. What does God have for me? Well, I should show up at church on Sunday. Okay, what is my value? Well, my value is not that great because I just work a secular job. I'm using air quotes
Mm-hmm.
here. I just work a secular job, and so my value is only insofar as I can give my money to the church or give my money to missions, or I get those couple weeks of vacation a year, and if I'm like a varsity Christian, I'm going to volunteer at VBS, or if I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
even more if I'm getting into like collegiate sports, I'm going to like go on a mission trip with my
Right.
vacation time, and that's my value. And so to just go back to the creator heart of God and just say, well, what is it about God's nature and his creative work and his giving his image to Adam and Eve and all humankind, um, that we rule and reign with him? What is it? What is about that connects to our work? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I actually did just preach the first sermon this week, and the title was "God's Hands Are in the Mud," and it's just this idea that like God's hands are dirty, just like a farmer or a gardener. Like he makes Adam out of the dirt from the ground. He makes a garden and he puts Adam in it, and he puts Adam in it to work the garden. Um, and so, like his first command to Adam and Eve are be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue the earth, and have dominion over it. And not one of that, not any part of that relates to like piety,
Right.
relates to prayer, relates to scripture memory, relates to
So
spiritual
good.
disciplines, going to church. Like, and I'm not putting those things down. I'm a pastor, for crying out loud. I'm
Yeah,
not putting them down.
we know you support the cause. Yeah.
But I just think
Pays the
there's
bills.
so much of like what God originally put us here on the planet
Yeah.
that has nothing to do with what I do. But come
Oh,
to any church and it sounds like what I do is it. Like
yeah.
that's the pinnacle of Christian life
Yeah.
is to do that. And so like I really think about discipleship with Monday in mind.
Yeah.
Now I'm also have like a lot of missions background, a lot of evangelistic background. So I would go, okay, if you wanted to reach a city, I've said this in Houston, but I would say it in Seattle as well. If you want to reach a city like Seattle, like you don't need a bunch of missionaries to go door knocking. Nobody here would open their doors. And I think in most places that's true. They're going to look at you through their ring camera and they're going to be like, yeah, no, not even getting up off the couch for that, whoever that is. So how do you do it? And I say, if you want to reach a city like Seattle, or just, put your city name in there, you need 98 people who are kingdom focused and two missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you go, well, what do you mean kingdom focused? And this is like we're going to live out God's rule and reign. We're going to be his representatives in the workplace because that's where the people are. That's why people come to our cities. Like you don't come to Seattle and not work.
Mm-mm.
Um,
They have
it's,
to.
rent is high here.
Yeah.
Get get to work. And so
Yeah.
like if you want to connect with people, they're in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go, well, what are the two missionaries for? Well, like the purpose of the church, the purpose of the leaders in the church is not to do all of the ministry. This is Ephesians 4. It says it's to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Now, when we think ministry, all of a sudden we just said church in our mind,
Yep.
right? That's what happens on Sunday. That's what
Yep.
happens on this place. And some of it is that. 1/7 of it is that.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the sevenths are um, name your company, put your
Yeah.
company in here. Like that is where the work of the ministry is. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people will go, okay, so let me get this right. So I do construction. So my work has value to God because, well, I can use my construction skills for, the church or for the mission stuff. And I said, no, 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 let's go deeper. Like that's the tip of the iceberg. And that is great. If you've got job skills and you are donating them to
Oh yeah.
nonprofits, if you're blessing your community, if you're doing all that, great. But let's go a step deeper. You are a construction person,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and how does that reflect God's nature? Well, we see like God's ability to design and to think and to structure like all of those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
You're an accountant. How does not your accounting gives you money to tithe the church, but how does your accounting for accounting's sake, how does that relate to God and his kingdom? Well, accounting shines light where there needs to be light. It speaks about truth and accuracy and order. All of these things are part of God's
Mm.
nature.
So good. Yes.
And like we can see what happens in a company where the accountants don't. do that,
Mm-hmm.
it gets into all kind of trouble, and then that impacts
Yeah.
people's jobs. And so like there's this side of being salt and light that we always just take to mean like tell your neighbor about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Tell your neighbor about Jesus. Do that thing. But also, like, how do you live out justice in the workplace? How do you live out truth in the workplace? And as
Right.
an accountant, you got a great opportunity to do that. So you kind of
Absolutely.
just go job by job by job and go, what's a theology of changing diapers? How
Yeah.
does changing diapers relate to God's heart, to his
Right.
nature, to his like will in the world? And because like when you're the mom or dad like changing diapers, that seems just like uh, it's like the most menial task you could possibly do
You're
with your
asleep
life.
half the time. Yeah. You're like, here
Yeah.
we go.
So I could literally preach a sermon series about this. So I'm just gonna stop and
Yeah,
kick it
you
back
are.
to
You
you.
are preaching. But I think I love what you're saying because I would so often, for so many years, separate the two things, right? Like I
Hmm.
was like, because it is, that's really a challenge, right? To talk about Jesus in the workplace and, to be
Yeah.
respectful of anyone else with other religions or no religion or whatever. And so you're always kind of, you're walking that line and you're being, you know, thoughtful in the way that you're approaching your conversations and all that. But it was really an evolution for me to realize that, like, I, like you said, a representative.
Hmm.
So I don't have to say I love Jesus. I get to just act as I think Jesus would act in the situation. And I am definitely always learning and growing through
Yeah.
that process because people are involved. And apparently, that's a challenge in life, right?
Yeah.
But I think that it's going from thinking that you have to talk about Jesus in the workplace to really acting with, like you said, the characteristics of God in the workplace. And it's interesting because I thought before we had a family, I just really thought I would be a stay-at-home mom when the time came. I just thought, oh, that's what we're gonna do. And God had a completely different story. Chad had been laid off for 2.5 years at that point.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a long stretch, 2008. So it was that whole crash. But um,
goodness.
and we got pregnant, and he didn't have a job. And I thought, well, I guess maybe he'll be a stay-at-home dad. We're just kind of trying to go with the flow here. And it was, Finn was born and, we kind of went through all the motions. And it was so clear to me that he would, like, God was not calling me away from my workplace. Like that was my mission field. And it was a big flip in my mind to be like, no, you're needed here. I need you here. I need you to be a light in this place. And now years later, I see all of it, but you think of it as a job, right?
Yeah.
But it is a ministry to be
Yeah.
around people all day that may or may
Hmm.
not know Jesus is a ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many sides of the ministry aspect of that, but there's like the church needs to develop a spirituality of work because
Mhm.
when we don't, our default, I mean, in our minds, we have separated the two so that here's
Mhm.
my Christian life, here's my work life, and the two don't really connect. And for all of these different categories, for like the witness element of it, or the honesty and work element of it, or
Yep.
all those kind of things, like they are absolutely connected. So sermon one was about kind of God's design. Genesis 1 and 2 is really what I spent most of my time in. And, we think of work as being a product of the fall, but work was given to us before the fall. Work was
So
corrupted at the
true.
fall, and it
Mhm.
became, you know, it became very difficult for us after the
Mhm.
fall.
It
Um,
became labor after the
yeah,
fall.
it
Yeah.
became laborious. And so,
Mhm.
um, one of the things I think it's important for us to do, though, is to think like, there's God's design. I think we've got to get back to how did God intend work to be?
Mhm.
Because then that helps us reframe our perspective. Like, is the biggest goal in life to retire at 50,
Mhm.
and then just get all of my elderly years to just go tour the country and watch,
Right.
leaves
That'd
turn
be great.
colors? Um, or like, is there actually a purpose to my work?
Right.
Um, but the other side of it is like sin has in fact impacted our work.
Mhm.
And I think like the name of your podcast is actually speaking to that of
Mhm.
like it's so easy for us to so this coming Sunday I'm gonna talk about like the how has sin impacted work?
Mhm.
How has sin impacted God's reign? How has sin impacted the image of God in us? Because we wind up making work into an idol now in
Mhm.
any number of ways, right? Like on the one side, you've got issues like laziness,
Mhm.
corruption, dishonesty, all of that. On the other side, though, it's like the good side. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
show up, nobody works harder at this company than I do, right? We say that like a virtue.
Yep.
Um,
We wear busy
and
like a badge of honor. We're like, yeah, this is it. Yeah.
yeah, and like I was the person in Houston in ministry, but I was the person who quietly would say, "Man, nobody is putting in more hours, nobody is working harder." And maybe it was true, I don't know. But in my
Mhm.
mind, like that was an honorable thing of I have
Mhm.
achieved this status, and then to realize like I am I have created an idol,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and like workaholism is just as bad as laziness, and so
Mhm.
when we don't understand the effects of the fall on our work, we're not thinking through how does my faith, how does my spirituality connect to what I'm doing Monday to Friday?
Right. And even like, I so often, I had a challenging meeting or a difficult discussion, being in leadership, that happens, right? You have to have some
Hmm.
pretty serious talks sometimes. And I used to just go into them, in my head or nervous, and like even just calling God into that situation before you even enter it, right? Like letting him go ahead of you in the conversation um is is an action you can take in the workplace that I wasn't doing for so long, right? I was just doing my thing and, like maybe hoping or praying that, but not like literally if I have to have a challenging conversation now, I will go and pray about it before I go in. And it changes not just, I mean, the outcome I'm not attached to. So it's whatever he needs it to be, but it's the process of like knowing that I'm not alone in this moment, that he's, and it's not just me, it's the other person, that they will receive it, that they'll be open to it, that they will understand, the intention of my communication and all that good stuff. And so it's really interesting how when you start to integrate him into the workplace, then you start to see him in the workplace. And I think
Yeah,
that's really, really powerful, is that he's there the whole time. It's just we're the ones that
right.
separate it and
Yeah, what you just said strikes at the heart of does God care about my job? Like,
Mhm.
does God care about what happens? Would God, like, yeah, we pray for missions, we pray for like world peace and all these like big things, but if I prayed for this meeting and this conversation, would God step in and act?
Ooh, that's
Um,
good.
I've just pulled up. This is the end of the book of Jonah, right?
Okay.
So Jonah has gone as a prophet to Nineveh, and he's gone with a message largely of condemnation. Like it's too late. God's going to destroy you. They repent, and then
He's
God,
being very bossy.
yeah,
Hmm.
he's being very bossy. I would say it's one-sided. And at the end, God has kind of given him this plant to sit in the shade with. Um, and then he sends a worm to eat the plant. And then Jonah is just like an absolute baby about this. He's crying about the plant to God. And at the
All
end,
I
God
can
says,
picture is Veggie Tales right now, just so you know.
"Fish slappers." Yeah. Um, wow, that was a throwback there.
Blast from the
Uh,
past. Yeah.
yeah. It says, but God said to Jonah, uh, "Do you do well to be angry for the plant?" And he said, "Yes, I do well to be angry, angry enough to die." And the Lord said, "You pity the plant for which you did not labor, nor did you make it grow, which came into being in a night and perished in a night. And should I not pity Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left, and also much cattle?" And so you go, hang on, why does God care about Nineveh's cattle?
Yeah. Great question.
God cares about Nineveh's cattle because the cattle, this is their economy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's saying, look, should I throw their he's not just saying their souls matter. He did say their souls matter. There's these people, they've turned, it's like the prodigal son returning. Hey, let's be excited. Let's throw a party. They're back.
Mm-hmm.
But then he goes, look, their economy matters. Like
Mm-hmm.
the welfare of their city. When Israel goes into exile, when they've done idolatry and all kinds of stuff, and God says, okay, I'm taking you out of the land. You're going into captivity. In Jeremiah writes a letter to the exiles, and he says, um, he tells them a lot of things. He says, pray for the peace of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're in a pagan country, and you can just see like you're this conservative Jewish family living in like
Mm-hmm.
what you view to be like Sodom and Gomorrah or like
Mm-hmm.
Times Square or
Mm-hmm.
the Vegas Strip or something like that. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, yeah, I'll pray for the city. I'll pray that God destroys it. Well, you live in the city. I've been at prayer meetings before where people are like, God, judge this, judge our country. I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
I'm
I
here right now.
I live here right now. Like,
Yeah.
can we pray
This
maybe
is
that God gives us
uncomfortable. Yeah.
God give us repentant hearts. Maybe let's pray for that.
Yes. Turn this
And so
around.
it's like you could see where they would be tempted to pray like, yeah, God, down with these people. But God says, pray for their peace, for in
Mm-hmm.
their peace you will find your peace.
Mm.
And we
Mm.
forget, like, God's command to Abraham is, go and be a blessing. In English, it says, go and I will make you a blessing. But in Hebrew, it's like they're both command words. So go and be a blessing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, how are we a blessing in our workplace? This
Yeah.
isn't just a go to your church, go to your family, be a blessing, bless those who are Christians, bless those that you like. It's like, go and be a blessing, and you'll be a blessing to like all the peoples. And
Yeah.
so, like, God cares about the economy of Nineveh. He cares about blessing the pagan nations around them. He cares about the peace
Mm.
of, Babylon and Syria and all these places that were not his people. Um, and that's when we start seeing this Old Testament missional heart of God of like these people were called to live every day, to live out loud for him. Like to proclaim, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
proclaiming is just the tip of the iceberg. It's all of this other stuff that for us in the modern day, like it relates to our daily jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the majority of our time, really. Like to your point, churches, we say a seventh. If you take a whole day of break, yes, but I mean it's really, that window in the morning, right? It's
Yeah,
like you can go do other stuff outside of that. And I think that, we're with work more than in most cases if we're full time more than our families and more than
sure.
other people, so it's our greatest sphere of influence really when we boil it down. And I think I have somebody I work with that says, whatever you do, just be okay with it, that you want to be okay with it being on the front page of the news tomorrow. And like that's my version of that, is like whatever people see me doing, I would only want them to see Jesus.
Uh,
Like, yeah, and it's
yeah,
pretty convicting because there's times where you don't act like Jesus would, and it's,
yeah.
you have to kind of have that comparison.
Yeah, yeah. Statistics say people spend an average of 80,000 hours in their life at their
Mm,
job. So
yeah.
if you think of their awake hours, their active hours,
Mhm.
that's the majority of your life is
Yeah.
in your workplace. And I think that's why it's so key where you work, how you work,
Mhm.
and as a pastor and as a missionary, like I think it's so key as to how are we training and equipping people to live the majority of their life, not
Mhm.
just their Sunday life, not just their home life, to live the majority of their life for his kingdom.
Yeah. Well, and let's also touch selfishly on the fact where I want to enjoy my work, and I think that there's so many people that that's just so much of what we talk about here on the show is like that, we're just kind of muddling through and like surviving, and like, we want to thrive. We want to get up in the morning and actually be glad to be with, others at this workplace, and to look at it as an opportunity and to grow. And so I think that when we start to invite God into that picture and to start to have him be a part of our workplace, it changes everything. It really does, because you're not like grinding, you know what I mean? You
Hmm.
see it as an opportunity. And I mean, sometimes, every 3 minutes I have to remind myself I'm shining for Jesus. I'm shining for Jesus, because it's work. You're still working, but yeah,
It is work.
it's challenging. Oh my gosh, I love this. Okay, so by the time this comes out, we'll put in the show notes, like I said, the link for the where you guys can find the sermons, and then you can just go back and listen to the last 2 years of Brian sharing with Mountain View, because it's been a fun journey to have him join our family. I wanted to ask you who has influenced you? Like, who's been an influencer for you in your life?
Well, the Spinning Plates podcast, first and
Sure,
foremost, right?
sure,
Obviously.
sure, sure,
Um, I'm going to try to do no like churchy answers, okay?
sure. Yep. I want
Um,
real. We do real talk here, so yeah, I want
yeah,
the real
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So churchy answers, kind of put to the side. My dad and my grandfather were huge influences in my life.
Mm, mm,
They have an amazing work ethic. They're very hard workers. Um, they're the kind of people that see a problem and don't think I can't figure that out. They see the problem. They think if someone else can do this, I can learn how to do it. And
ooh,
so
I
that's
love
kind
that.
of how I've approached that. Just in my walk in my spiritual life, though, Francis Schaeffer, he's kind of a C.S. Lewis type from a
Mhm,
generation ago. I grew up in a very authoritarian church background.
mhm,
I'll just say it nicely that way.
mhm,
Um, and a lot of the people that I grew up with don't have their faith anymore, or at least didn't for a
mm,
while. They
mm,
basically said, well, if that's what church is, I'm done. And I came to this point where I go, okay, I think Jesus is true, and I think the Bible is true. I think I've been taught a lot of things that weren't true, and I need to go back to the source and figure that out. And so I kind of was reading a lot of Francis Schaeffer at the time. He's just written a stack of books. Um, and there's probably not a paper that I've
mhm,
written in my academic career, um, that doesn't have a Schaefer quote.
Oh, I love
Uh,
that.
even even this series on work, he was the very first person, like this whole holistic way to see the world, like get rid of the sacred, secular divide, all this.
Oh,
I'm reverting to year one of college, really.
I
Uh,
love that. I might have to go read some stuff. I've never read anything from him.
yeah, he's interesting. He's very deep and philosophical. He's not
Okay.
quite as accessible as
I'll
C.S.
check back
Lewis.
in with you. I'll be like, Brian, I tried it.
Yeah, but
I'll just
he's got
get
some
my
really great
doses of
stuff.
him through your sermons. I'll just
There
like,
we go. There we
I
go.
like it. That's funny. Oh, I love that. I love hearing that because I think, who we are today was so built by other people who have come across us in our lives. And, I mean, when you said my grandpa, yeah, my grandpa Jack, and he's like, that's who he is like a
Hmm.
hard worker. And like, I think we all kind of take pride a little bit that we pick that up from grandpa, and I think that
Yeah,
it's something that I hope my kids will pick up from me. I have a,
it's
he's almost 13, so I don't think he's picking it up yet, but I'm hoping he will at some point.
give it time. It's good, but it's also a little bit haunting. Like every time I want to cut a corner, I can just
Oh,
hear one of their voices going,
yes.
If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right."
Yes, yes,
Or take your time.
yes. Or
There's
you're
no
going to
rush.
pay somebody to do that? You could do that yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just hear all those voices in my head going, "Ah,
Yeah. I've had to fight one. I have to be honest, I've had to fight that one a lot because I do work really hard and I'm thinking, well, now I think I could pay for it if I wanted to, So it's like we have to make
right."
our decisions like that. But that's funny. Okay, I have some wrap up questions. I'm so happy that you've been here. All right, what are you feeding your mind with right now? Like listening to or reading? I know you read a lot.
Yeah, so I read a ton for sermons just from all over the place. That's typically like my sermon starters are like something that has seemingly nothing to do until I get deeper in, seemingly
Yep.
nothing to do with the rest of the sermon, like something from history or science or business world or movies or whatever. So I am a
Well, that's
very
good to know. I've
curious
always been
person.
curious. Like how how does
Like
one
what
even
on earth was happening with those first 2 minutes?
Yeah, I got it. I got it now.
Um, actually, I got How I Start My Sermons. I got it from, I don't even know if I would say it's a secular book. She has one parent who's Hindu and the other who's Christian. It's an Indian lady. It's called The Art of Meeting. And she
Okay.
talks about how every meeting you've ever gone to, how they start with, "Hey, here's where the bathrooms are, and here's where this is, and here's where that is," and
Oh.
every meeting wraps up with, "Hey, hey, please put your trash there. If you want to fill out our form, please do that." It's always the logistics. And she goes, the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes are the most important thing because everyone's listening. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, like I don't say good morning. You'll notice this. Now you're
Mm-hmm.
going to notice it.
Now I'm
I
gonna
don't
watch. Now
Yeah, I don't say good morning. I don't make a comment about the sports, about the weather, about anything.
Yeah, I've
I
noticed
just
that.
say like it's like
Yep.
a cold open.
Yep.
But what am I feeding my mind with? Apart from that, that is a lot of my consumption, I would say right there. But I'm really enjoying. There's a series of books by Jocko Willink.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Navy SEAL, and these are books on leadership. And it's
Yep.
just a very no nonsense approach to
Mm-hmm.
leadership that I have found quite fantastic. Um, and I mean, I'm saying this as a man, and I realize probably a lot of your listeners might be ladies. My oldest daughter is reading it, and she is
Oh, I
just
love that.
enamored with like his stories are amazing, the application. It's this sense of like just one getting rid of your ego in decision making and
Mm-hmm.
leadership. Like that's a huge killer to actual success. And so
Mm-hmm.
like Navy SEALs are all about the like get the mission done.
Yep. Check the
Um,
ego at the door.
yeah, check your ego at the door is like lessons number one, two, and three.
Yep.
And then there's so much about like just personal responsibility. And so we're so quick to blame other people. And part of it is we want to keep our ego intact. It always
Yep.
kind of goes back to that. So they're not writing as Christians at all. I don't know what their faith is. It's just, but I'm seeing, of course, checking our ego at the door is like a huge thing of
Oh yeah.
it,
Yeah.
it's not about me being right or me looking good. And that's a huge thing. I'm also reading Malcolm Gladwell
Yep.
has got a bunch of books. So these guys are kind of like polar opposite ends of the
Yeah, I was
spectrum.
gonna say, but I love it.
Um,
Yeah, I need to the one you were just talking about. I've had other people recommend. I'm gonna get with you and find out which one I would start with because
yeah, his book's gonna make you mad. Just
yeah,
just
that's fine. I'm
just
okay with
know that
that.
it's
Angry.
gonna. Yeah.
Come to church angry, you'll know why. What brings you joy?
Oh man, so many things. I like doing stuff with people. So I'm a big extrovert, and I'm on any of like the personality tests. I'm on the doing side, and
Hmm.
so I just love doing things with people. Of course, love my family, love my kids. I love to eat lots of different kinds of food, and so our Easter this last year, we did like this big, huge Middle Eastern feast, and we each
Oh,
took like Middle Eastern food is hard to make. It's just so involved. Like most
yeah.
international food is, it's not the convenient way to cook, but it's so delicious. And so
Hmm.
each family member kind of took a dish and went all in, and then we brought together this massive like
Oh, that's
feast.
cool.
So I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you're still a foodie at heart, right? So you
Oh,
should start a
absolutely.
new blog with all your time.
With all my time, yeah.
With all your time. Okay, what is your favorite way? Now, I love this because at the beginning of the conversation, you told us this was something you're not very good at or wasn't very good at. But what's your favorite way to like pause and reset?
For me, it is activity,
Mm,
um, which is not pausing at all,
me too.
but
Me too. I'm totally the same. Yeah.
like I feel like part of where my mind went, so much of a pastor's job and a teacher job, it's just in the cerebral world. It's just
Mhm.
intellectual. So you sit around like to get to be the point of being a professor, you've spent 12 years in school and you
Mhm.
just sit and read and write a ton. And like I look at my youngest son, who I think is very much like me, and
Mhm.
he's so active and he's
And
so
he's
interested
so
in things, and
wonderful too. I just want to say, you know how much I love him. He's so,
he's an awesome kid.
yeah.
Uh, and he just wants to go out and do and explore, and he's an enthusiast. And I go, like, that's also like part of the trigger for me, or like point of awareness for me is like I see the joy he has in something. When I'm not feeling that, I'm like, ooh,
Mm.
what's taking that sort of childlike
Ooh, that's
Brian
good.
side away? And so like
Yeah.
having a child that mirrors me, that isn't being weighed down by all of life's drama,
Yeah.
having that mirror every day is really, really good. But
Right.
I realized like I was made for a lot more activity than a student teaching pastoral lifestyle gives me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, one, I think it relates to like physical health, heart health, mental health. So being, in Houston, I started biking during the pandemic. One of those things I did when I was in high school and just kind of got away from because of lifestyle. And that gave me the time and space to do that. And I ride almost every single day. If I'm not injured or have a broken bike, which those
Yeah.
two things
Yeah.
happen more
Yep.
than you would think,
Yep.
I would ride probably 350 days a year,
Yep.
apart from those two things.
Yes.
So I love to get out and ride, even if I'm tired, like to just get out and go spin a little bit.
Hmm.
I come back in and I just feel invigorated and
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
refreshed,
It's,
ironically.
I know you and Chad have gone riding and yeah, it's so interesting because it's almost like he's antsy. And then when he comes back, he's just like calm, it's just that ride gets it out of him. And yeah, I know that's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah.
I know that too for physical activity for me too.
Yeah, sure.
I'm active while I pause, which is I think something I really love teaching people. Like you don't have to sit with a journal to pause. Like you can, go for a walk or,
Hmm.
go have coffee with a friend or whatever your version is. So I love asking that question. So if you could go back in time and you get to pick how far back you go, but if you could go back in time, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Well, depending on like what sphere we're talking, I might have said buy some Bitcoin,
Yeah.
back when it was back when it was
That's good. That's good.
$12.
Yeah.
That would have been a great piece of
Y2K will be
advice.
fine. Like
Yeah,
these, yeah.
Y2K will be fine. No, I think probably these sort of questions force us to think through like what piece of advice have I just recently learned that I feel like I've been missing.
Yes.
So I think for me, as I look back, I think I would go back and tell myself to slow down.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm. That's a good
and
one.
again, this comes from like being a high activity person, but I feel like for so many years, I've lived into the future.
Yeah.
So like I'm in college, and what do you want to do in college? I want to graduate and be doing the job that I'm in college to study to do,
Hmm.
right? Well, then you go into a master's program. All right, what do you want to do there? Well, I'm just trying to finish this so that there's always like this
Hmm.
corner that you can't see around,
Oh, that's so
and
good.
and so I'm at that point now where there's still corners I can't see around, but I'm also going, I need to enjoy right here, right now. And I've seen this enough where I saw people who took a different college approach who weren't doing, like, I think I was doing 21 hours a semester um, during college. And I see people who weren't doing that, who slowed down, who have tons of friends, who had a vibrant life, who
Hmm.
developed just in ways that I didn't develop, either mentally or spiritually until later.
Yep.
I just realized how much I sacrificed by taking that always driving for the next thing approach. And so
That's great.
I would definitely tell myself that.
That's such good advice. Yeah. I mean, I think just the art of learning to be present, right, is
Yeah.
really challenging for some of us. Like, okay, I'm just gonna be in this moment and not
Hmm.
think about. And I know for me, like I try to fill it up the space. Like I would, try to pack as much as I could into a day, or as
Right. Right.
whatever. And it's like, oh, this is good enough. Like this is okay. Like you don't
Right.
have to fill. You can have a space.
Yeah, the challenge with that is like there's the verse about redeeming the time because the days are evil. So there's almost like a Christian virtue
Yes,
to that, but like there's a certain point that we reach where we cross a line, and it's so hard to tell, especially when it's good things that we're packing in. It's
that's
so hard
right.
to tell when we've taken a good thing that seems good that we've actually just turned into an idol,
That's
and
right.
it's so hard. It's so hard to spot when that
Yeah,
happens.
just being in tune with the Holy Spirit and trying to pay attention, I think, is the key there because
Yeah,
it can creep up so fast, and it's kind of overwhelming when you're like, wait, I know like when I stopped teaching Sunday school, I was like, I'm supposed to stop teaching. Like, why would you have me stop teaching?
right.
It doesn't even seem like they need teachers. It was just a
Mhm.
very strange, but I knew that he was saying it, and then then of course he's got a different idea and different plan. But yeah, it's just that if we're running ahead and we're filling everything up and we're looking ahead so much, we're not really hearing what he's saying right now. So
Yeah.
it's really good advice. I love that.
I, there are certain pictures I have of myself throughout life,
Hmm.
like actual photographs, and on occasion I look back and I go, "Wow, that guy was really happy."
Mm,
And then in that moment, I go, "I'm looking in the mirror, and this guy is not that guy."
mm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
and like those are always really big tells that something has happened. Um, and sometimes like it's good things that we're doing that we're supposed to slow down and give back to God.
Right.
And there's been more than one time where I've taken a break from ministry,
Mm-hmm.
or where I'm just doing like what I really have to do, not all the extra things that I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been more than one time where I've had to say, you know what, I'm not taking any speaking engagements. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna sit here in my shop and do some woodworking and make some
Mm-hmm.
food and kind of until God makes it just very, very clear.
Mm-hmm.
I was having one of these moments kind of during a season of burnout where we'd just come back from living overseas, serving as missionaries. We'd kind of gone through a little bit of a war zone. I mean, we were much more battered than I was aware that we were battered. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was, I was trying to keep my eye on the ball, right? Like, so I can't go back to the Middle East, but I'm gonna still be active. Like, it's almost like this ego thing. Like, I'm gonna still
Yep.
be that hard worker for God.
Yep.
I'm
I'm
gonna,
gonna add
you know,
value. I'm gonna,
I
yeah.
am not quitting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to do that. And I mean, this is like what turned into a really good ministry, started as a super unhealthy ministry, but just focusing on sort of the international side of Houston and going, wow, for the 3,000 churches that are in Houston, not many, few, if any, are actually reaching into like specific ethnicities, like actually reaching them. And part of it is like we have people from every religion, every religious background there. And so
Mm-hmm.
people tend to just kind of reach suburbanites who are kind of like them and kind of in family mode. But like once you get outside of that, hey, we're in the family mode thing, like very few churches for anybody. And I was having such a hard time getting people to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I had this moment where it was almost like an out of body kind of thing
Yeah.
where I'm looking at myself in the mirror going, I wouldn't work with me right now.
Oh, wow. Oh my
It's like,
gosh.
no wonder people wouldn't work with me. I wouldn't work with me. Like I've turned into
Wow.
such a frantic, desperate,
Yeah.
angry, time
Oh
driven
gosh. Yep.
person. And like,
Discontent. That's a word that,
yeah,
yep.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
all of those things. And I go, okay, I need to take a little break. I need to calm down. I need to get healthy again. And it's like this is happening. I mean, I talked about the last one that brought me up here, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, that one was maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, I think. And I looked at the same time, I looked back at the picture and I go, that other guy looks happy. This guy in the
Mm-hmm.
mirror looks like somebody nobody wants to follow. And like, it's just creating this vicious cycle
Mm-hmm.
of me trying.
Yeah.
Um,
Gosh, that's so good. Yeah. Wow. I love that. Okay. What is a favorite product you can't live without?
Gosh, you sent me this one in advance, and I still don't have
I know I send it in
anything.
advance because it's always so hard. But I mean, we've had people have said their AirPods, they've said coffee maker,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
lots of different options.
I've probably carried a pocket knife in my pocket
Oh,
every day since I was 5. So like that's
I love
obviously
that.
one.
You're the guy at
Um,
Christmas everyone wants handy because you'll cut the ribbons and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Open the
yes,
box real quick. That
absolutely.
was grandpa for us.
So like that's a huge thing. Probably my phone. I use it just
Mhm.
my life. I'm very techie,
Yeah.
and just connected to the world. I mean, through people around the world. So like that's a constant thing. My bike,
Yeah. I know it
my
was
guitar.
crazy
I don't
when
know.
you
I'm naming more than one here, but
you can. I was surprised you didn't start with your bike because I was like, I think it'll be his bike that he can't live without. But it's funny that you say that because when you first came up and then we were all getting connected and stuff like that, and then you're on Instagram. I was like, my pastor's on Instagram? Like he must be very techy. This is great. Brian's
I'm
on Instagram.
yeah, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Be Real now.
Yeah.
I tried Snapchat for a while, and then like very quickly go, no, this is not a
Yeah.
durable platform for what I'm trying to
Yeah.
do.
Be
And
Real is a
as
really good example of me having to listen to what God's saying because I was doing it super fun. And then I started to turn it into a job. Like I had to like, what if, and then I'm panicked because I missed the Be Real. And like, I'm like, you know what? I don't think he's calling me to this space right now.
yeah,
Instead
yeah,
of
yeah. I think we have to evaluate how far in that we get, but
yeah, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
For sure. Oh, Brian, this was lovely. Thank you for coming on. I'm so grateful. And thank you for going with the flow because I know I kind of threw you a curveball asking you to be on my podcast, but I appreciate it so much.
No, this has been a lot of fun. I always enjoyed chatting with you, Selena.
Yes. I'll have you on every time you open up a new series. We'll just have you come and promote it on the podcast. So,
Okay, there we go.
all right. Thanks for being here. Thank you for listening. I'm just so grateful that you would take the time to be here with me today. I hope that if there's anything that inspired you or got you excited, that you would share it to social media or send me a message with any input or feedback that you have. And just really appreciate the support and the encouragement that I get from you guys all the time. I will keep showing up and I hope you keep listening.